The heavy rain that's been felt across the United Arab Emirates and some neighbouring Gulf countries, a region usually known for its hot and arid climate.
The world is reeling from the relentless floods of recent days, which have devastated entire communities. Climate change is fueling these catastrophic disasters, bringing untold misery and chaos to millions across the globe. No corner of the world has been spared the wrath of rising waters. Are the floods a warning sign of something much more sinister to come? Let us understand the warning the floods give us through all this destruction. The first sign of the apocalypse: extreme rainfall is intensifying at an alarming rate across the United States and worldwide. It's not just about the sheer volume of water that falls in one place, but also about how quickly it pours down. New research sheds light on how this pattern is shifting. Over the past century, global precipitation has increased by only 0.04 inches per decade. However, in certain regions of the United States, rainfall has surged by 30% during the same period. But simply focusing on the increase in rain only scratches the surface of a much larger issue. Recognizing the changing trends, the organization First Street created a groundbreaking risk map to illustrate a disturbing shift in what the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration calls 100-year floods. These are catastrophic events so severe that the likelihood of them occurring in any given year is about 1%. However, these so-called 100-year floods are now happening every 7 to 8 years in the worst-hit areas. Aging infrastructure, built with outdated metrics in mind, is increasingly unable to handle these new deluges. A warmer atmosphere is at the heart of this change. This disrupts the water cycle, leading to heavier downpours in shorter periods, transforming manageable showers into overwhelming torrents. The atmosphere becomes thirstier as it warms, holding more moisture and resulting in sudden, intense rainstorms. These extreme rain events can overwhelm existing drainage systems, leading to widespread flooding. Roads become rivers, homes are inundated, and fields turn into swamps. Urban areas, with their extensive networks of concrete and asphalt, are particularly vulnerable as rainwater has nowhere to go. Storm drains and sewers often overflow, causing significant property damage and posing health risks. Farmers also face severe challenges as crops are destroyed and soil is eroded by heavy rains. Livelihoods are threatened, and communities dependent on agriculture are left struggling to recover. Coastal regions, already vulnerable due to rising sea levels, suffer even more as storm surges and intense rainfall combine to create devastating floods. Efforts to address this issue are underway. Engineers are re-evaluating floodplain maps, and city planners are redesigning stormwater management systems to better handle these new realities. Solutions like green infrastructure, which includes rain gardens and permeable pavements, are being implemented to absorb excess water. Public awareness is also crucial. Communities are being educated on emergency preparedness, and early warning systems are being improved to give people more time to evacuate. Governments and organizations are working together to create comprehensive strategies that address both immediate and long-term challenges. Despite extensive efforts, the rapid increase in extreme rainfall events remains a significant concern. As temperatures continue to climb, the frequency and intensity of these storms are predicted to rise. This reality demands swift and coordinated action to protect lives, infrastructure, and the environment from the devastating effects of intense flooding. Water management strategies must be rewritten to reflect a collective effort to build resilience against a rapidly changing climate. While scientists and policymakers worry about the rising floods, insurance companies quietly assess their risks, shifting the burden onto homeowners through increasing premiums or denying coverage altogether. Governments promote multi-billion-dollar infrastructure plans, yet sewer systems and flood defenses built for past storms struggle under today's deluge. Climate change skeptics dismiss the evidence, attributing the patterns to natural cycles or localized phenomena, despite clear global trends showing increasingly erratic and intense rainfall patterns. While the data can be fascinating to some, those living in flood-prone areas find it terrifying. Yet, development continues in floodplains, and wetlands are paved over, guaranteeing that when the next 100-year flood strikes, it won't just be rain that is washed away. Entire communities will be left devastated, both financially and physically. The water cycle is fundamentally changing, leaving society scrambling to adapt to an increasingly unpredictable world. However, the urgency is often underestimated, with many holding on to the hope that the next storm will be a few days away. Dry periods are growing even drier, while wet periods are becoming significantly wetter, and this is happening not just year by year, but down to the minute. First Street, a non-profit research organization, revisited rainfall data across the United States, scrutinizing it minute by minute. This critical analysis revealed a new trend that significantly altered the understanding of flood risks across the nation. Strangely, regions experiencing less annual precipitation and more drought are now facing increased flooding. This new flood risk map exposed the most vulnerable regions, forcing society to rethink how to manage this growing deluge. In the American Southwest, for instance, drought-prone areas like Arizona and Nevada have recently been struck by flash floods following intense but brief downpours. Meanwhile, in the Midwest, once fertile farmlands have been inundated by storms far beyond what the land and existing flood defenses can handle. The rising floods now threaten America's coastal cities and their aging infrastructure. The horrible landscape of entire cities underwater. Coastal areas face their own challenges as rising sea levels compound the effects of torrential rains, leading to unprecedented flooding, even in places where floods have historically been rare. Cities like Miami and New York, which have both seen notable flooding in recent years, are examples of how urban development often ignores the realities of changing climate conditions. The aging infrastructure that struggles to manage current rainfall levels adds to the complexity. Sewer systems in cities like Chicago and Houston were designed for storms of the past, leaving them overwhelmed and prone to failure when faced with modern rainfall intensity. Billions of dollars have been allocated to upgrade infrastructure, yet many projects lag behind or focus on short-term fixes rather than comprehensive, future-focused solutions. Moreover, the reluctance of certain regions to acknowledge changing climate patterns hinders coordinated responses, with skeptics attributing the patterns to natural cycles or localized phenomena. Efforts to build climate resilience face political and ideological barriers. This divide creates fragmented policies and often leaves local communities bearing the brunt of flood disasters. Despite these challenges, there is a growing awareness of the need for innovative solutions. Green infrastructure, such as rain gardens, permeable pavements, and urban wetlands, is gaining traction as a way to reduce flooding while enhancing urban biodiversity. In rural areas, restoring wetlands and implementing better land management practices are becoming key strategies to absorb excess rainfall. However, such efforts require a collective commitment from governments, businesses, and individuals. The future of water management is being rewritten, and it demands a comprehensive approach that considers the complex interplay of urbanization, climate change, and environmental stewardship. Without significant change, extreme rainfall events will continue to outpace current measures, leaving more communities vulnerable to the devastation of flooding. The challenge is clear. Society must adapt swiftly and cohesively to a world where floods become more intense and unpredictable with each passing storm. New York City offers grim lessons on handling heavy rain. In September of last year, the city was drenched with nearly 8 inches of rain in a single day. What was once a landscape of lakes and streams has become a jungle of impermeable concrete and asphalt. Today, roughly 72% of the city is sealed under this impermeable cover. Instead of a natural drainage system, stormwater is directed into an outdated sewer network built for a climate that no longer exists. The original engineers did not anticipate 3, 4, or even 8 inches of rain in a day. What was considered a once-in-a-century event now hits New York City roughly every 35 years. Designed to handle just 1 or 2 inches of rain per hour, the infrastructure cannot cope with the torrents pouring down today. Meanwhile, outdated flood maps from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, known as Atlas 14 and Atlas 2, are still used to predict flood risk and guide infrastructure upgrades. These maps have not kept up with the new climate reality. For years, traditional methods of measuring precipitation risk were sufficient. But with the upward trend of rainfall, averages no longer reflect the current storm patterns. Society faces a new problem, and old systems cannot handle it. If the flood maps and sewer networks do not adapt to these changes, streets will keep filling up, and the infrastructure will continue to fail. The rest of the nation is not faring much better. Flood-prone areas accustomed to heavy rainfall are now overwhelmed by even fiercer storms. Regions known for dry spells now face flash floods as climate change disrupts weather patterns. While everyone scrambles to adapt to the rising water levels, the increasing frequency of extreme events is outpacing planning efforts, leaving communities exposed. In the Midwest, river towns brace for spring floods, but changing patterns now bring devastating rain in late summer and fall. The Mississippi River, which has historically swollen from melting snow, now flooded unpredictably from intense downpours. Levees meant to protect communities buckle under the pressure, and sandbagging efforts struggle to keep pace with the rising waters. In the Southwest, desert cities face their own challenges. Rainfall patterns, once rare and predictable, now result in flash floods that catch people off guard. Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Albuquerque have seen normally dry washes and arroyos swell with dangerous speed, threatening neighborhoods built in areas previously considered low risk. Urban development, which replaced natural water-absorbing landscapes with pavement and buildings, leaves little room for water to soak into the ground. Instead, the water surges through streets and overwhelms drainage systems. On the Gulf Coast, hurricanes and tropical storms bring torrential rain, worsening existing problems. Houston, which already experiences regular flooding, finds itself increasingly vulnerable. In 2017, Hurricane Harvey brought over 60 inches of rain to some areas, submerging neighborhoods and damaging thousands of homes. As the sea warms and storms intensify, the region faces even more severe flooding threats. Efforts to adapt to changes in the climate are underway, but progress remains slow. In New York City, investment is being made in green infrastructure, such as rooftop gardens and permeable pavements, which help absorb rainwater before it reaches the sewers. In New Orleans, the drainage network is being expanded to handle heavier rainfall. Along the Mississippi River, communities are re-evaluating their strategies for managing floodplains. After Hurricane Ida, New York City faces the harsh reality of unpredictable storms. The hidden side of FEMA maps. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration provides maps that reflect weather patterns from 20 to 30 years ago, looking backward rather than forward. First Street Foundation, an organization focused on climate data, decided to approach the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's information differently. Instead of considering average precipitation levels across the nation, it focused on extreme rainfall events. Although these events are not necessarily more frequent, they have become more intense, with short bursts of heavy rainfall leading to devastating floods. In Hollis, Queens, a neighborhood long troubled by floods, residents like Amit Shiprasad have noticed worsening conditions. The area lacks green spaces to absorb rainwater, and historical maps reveal that Amit's neighborhood used to be a lake. Standing in front of his home, he can see how it is positioned in what was once a pond, as indicated on a map from 1928. When comparing old maps of New York City's creeks and lakes with today's flood map, the two are almost identical. The Federal Emergency Management Agency's 100-year floodplain map, which is based on the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Atlas 14, directly influences the availability and cost of flood insurance. However, it does not consider flooding caused by heavy rainstorms, leaving many communities unprotected and overexposed. In Amit's neighborhood, flood insurance was never sold because the area is not technically within a Federal Emergency Management Agency flood zone. Nevertheless, flooding has wreaked havoc on the community. When Hurricane Ida struck the eastern United States as a Category 4 storm in 2021, it brought record rainfall to New York City, dumping over 7 inches of rain and reaching a peak of 3 inches per hour. Amit's neighborhood was unprepared for the deluge. On the day the hurricane hit, Amit woke up like it was any other morning. He had dinner with his family before alarms began to blare. He hurried downstairs wearing a poncho and joined his father with shovels and rakes to clear the stormwater basins. This was something they always did when it rained heavily. However, due to ongoing city construction, the basin grates had been covered, preventing water from draining properly. The water level continued to rise. Amit tried to move his truck up the block to keep it safe, but by the time he returned, the entire street was flooded. The storm had become relentless. In New York, the floods claimed 13 lives, with 11 of those deaths occurring in flooded basement apartments, mostly in Queens. Among the victims were 43-year-old Famati Ramskriat and her 22-year-old son Krisha, also known as Tara and Nicholas. They couldn't escape the rushing water that crashed through the wall and engulfed their basement apartment. Tara and Nicholas had been tenants in Amit's family's basement. Before the hurricane struck, Amit had raised the doors to his home by 3 or 4 feet to brace for possible flooding, but it wasn't enough. The storm brought a downpour that overwhelmed his efforts. Now, Amit no longer rents out his basement. Instead, he uses the space for community events, perhaps in a futile attempt to wash away the memory of the tragedy that unfolded. The destruction left behind by the hurricane was devastating. In New York City alone, over 33,500 buildings were destroyed, and the storm caused $75 billion in damages across the United States. Amit's home needed extensive repairs, costing upwards of $344,000. Despite his efforts to rebuild, the loss left a deep mark on his spirit. Amit still remembers the moment when the floodwaters broke through the walls. Unfortunately, the wall collapsed, and that's why all the destruction happened, he says. So I've done my part when it comes to repairs. I just pray and ask God that it never floods again. That's all. His prayers seem almost hollow in the face of the storm's aftermath. The devastation was not something that could easily be forgotten or repaired. It had changed his neighborhood and his life forever. Yet not all areas faced such destruction. Across the Hudson River in Hoboken, New Jersey, their flood defenses held firm. The city had taken a pragmatic approach to climate change and invested in significant flood protection measures. Hoboken's proactive efforts to address the challenges of a changing climate paid off. While many other neighborhoods were devastated, Hoboken remained relatively safe. Their flood defenses, built with the future in mind, offered a glimpse into what could be achieved with foresight and preparation. Amit couldn't stop thinking about how different things could have been if similar precautions had been taken in his own neighborhood. He could no longer rent out his basement, and the loss was a heavy burden on his family. The storm had washed away not just buildings, but also lives, dreams, and a sense of security. Hoboken's vulnerability to flooding has deep roots in its history. Once a tidal marsh, the land was filled in for industrial purposes in the early 1900s. This left many low-lying areas prone to flooding, especially with a combined sewer system that channels stormwater and sewage into the same pipes. Climate change has only worsened the situation, bringing more frequent and intense storms that threaten the city. Acknowledging this grim reality, Hoboken initiated a trip to build resilience by creating resilience parks across the city. One city's resilience and another's despair show how differently communities handle floods. Hoboken's biggest park underwater. A tour of the largest park reveals one of the 19 rain gardens designed to manage water during heavy rains. These gardens, resembling ponds, slow down the flow of water into the stormwater system. The water, filters through plants and soil before draining into a large underground tank beneath the park. This detention tank, capable of holding up to 1 million gallons, collects stormwater from the park and northern Hoboken, preventing it from flooding the streets. The measures seem to be effective, with Hoboken avoiding the catastrophic flooding that ravaged Queens. But the contrast between Amit's despair and Hoboken's resilience highlights the uneven impact of climate disasters and the urgent need for cities to adapt to a changing climate. While Amit's prayers might bring some comfort, they won't prevent the next storm from hitting. Hoboken claims an impressive 88% reduction in flooding since implementing these mitigation measures, but time will tell if they can withstand the relentless progress of climate change. It's a promising demonstration, but comparing Hoboken to Hollis, Queens, reveals a troubling pattern. Race and wealth often determine where disaster recovery efforts are concentrated, leaving safety and economic outcomes heavily skewed. While Hoboken's resilience parks provide a model for urban resilience, they also expose the disparities in disaster preparedness and recovery. The city's carefully designed rain gardens and underground detention tanks stand in stark contrast to neighborhoods like Amit's, where such precautions were never put in place. Instead, his community faced the harsh aftermath of the storm, grappling with loss and uncertainty. Walking through the lush parks and beside the rain gardens in Hoboken, the atmosphere feels calm and hopeful. Families gather, children play, and the gardens brim with life. The underground tanks lie hidden beneath the surface, quietly collecting and managing stormwater. Meanwhile, Amit and his neighbors continued to rebuild their lives, grappling with the devastation left behind by the storm. The powerful winds and relentless rain not only tore apart buildings, but also shattered dreams, leaving a lasting impact on the community. In Hoboken, the successful reduction of flooding highlighted a stark contrast, emphasizing the need for comprehensive planning that includes all communities, regardless of race or economic status. A study conducted in 2018 revealed significant disparities in post-disaster recovery. In areas that had suffered at least $10 billion in damages from natural disasters, white families experienced an increase in wealth of $126,000 after recovery, while black families saw a decline of $27,000. This data illuminated the widening wealth gap across major U.S. cities. In Hoboken, 64% of the population is white, while Amit's neighborhood in Queens is only 1.4% white. With 1.3 million New Yorkers living near or within a floodplain, a number expected to surpass 2 million by the end of the century, half are classified as low income by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and half are from communities of color. Hollis, Amit's neighborhood in Queens, underwent a $24 million sewer expansion between 2019 and 2021 to address its long-standing flooding problem. Despite this effort, the area continued to suffer from frequent floods. One of Amit's neighbors would often seek refuge at his home whenever it rained, terrified that her wall would collapse again. The entire community shared this anxiety, and as climate change intensified, making wet seasons even wetter, solutions became increasingly difficult to implement. Amit foresaw a looming challenge, predicting that in the next 20 years, communities would need to decide which areas to protect and which to abandon. There was no one-size-fits-all solution, but hope remained for effective flood mitigation strategies. Research showed that every dollar spent on these efforts could yield an 8-fold return. Advocates suggested managing water with green infrastructure, aiming to transform New York City into a sponge-like environment in every neighborhood. From streets to green roofs and parks, the goal was to absorb water wherever possible. Understanding the challenges and opportunities of urban flooding required a closer look at First Street Foundation's risk map, which focused on flooding from heavy rainfall. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, known as the Federal Emergency Management Agency, had designated around 8 million properties as being in special flood hazard areas, but First Street Foundation's data suggested that 17.7 million properties were actually at risk. The disparity between the Federal Emergency Management Agency's estimates and First Street Foundation's data primarily stemmed from the risks posed by intense rainfall. From 2015 to 2019, the Federal Emergency Management Agency's own data revealed that 40% of flood insurance claims originated outside the high-risk zones highlighted on their maps. An even more troubling insight emerged from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's flood maps, which indicated that 100-year floods were now occurring more frequently, becoming 35-year floods in places like New York City. According to First Street Foundation's study, in some regions, 100-year floods had turned into 8-year floods, increasing their likelihood by 12 times. The Midwest particularly suffers from a severe underestimation of these 100-year events, especially in areas like southern Indiana and northern Kentucky near the Louisville metropolitan area. Here, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Atlas 14 predicted these floods to occur once every century. However, in reality, they now happen every 7 or 8 years. First Street Foundation's data also revealed that not just the Midwest, but the entire northeastern United States faced hidden risks of extreme rainfall. Even Northern California, despite experiencing an overall decline in annual rainfall, now sees 100-year floods occurring once every 35 years. Climate change is disrupting weather patterns, bringing chaotic impacts to various systems. The exact future of a hotter planet remains unclear, but these shifting weather patterns are reshaping landscapes rapidly. The risks are high, and it would be unwise not to adapt to these new challenges. Cities like Hoboken, New Jersey, are setting the example, modernizing their infrastructure to handle a changing water cycle. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, traffic resumed along the Nairobi-Kisumu highway after River Nyando had overflowed its banks, flooding Ahero Bridge and rendering the busy road impassable. Vehicles heading in and out of Kisumu were trapped in traffic until police intervened, restoring order and normal traffic flow. As some cities build defenses, many places worldwide still struggle with devastating floods. Unpredictable floods with horrible consequences. As these flood events become more common and increasingly unpredictable, they are catching even the most thorough planners off guard. Maps and data are outdated, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's findings are just scratching the surface. If New York City is facing a 35-year flood every century, what does that mean for smaller towns that lack the resources to invest in infrastructure like Hoboken? Are communities as prepared as they think they are? Every region needs to assess how it's adapting to this new normal. Bridging the gap between outdated predictions and the reality of flood risks, First Street Foundation's data offers a stark warning. The discrepancies underscore the urgent need to reevaluate flood preparedness strategies nationwide. Heavy precipitation and intense storms are now overwhelming outdated flood maps and models, leaving homeowners and entire communities unprepared. Even the most carefully marked high-risk zones have proven insufficient, as demonstrated by the 40% of insurance claims originating outside these zones. In this new climate landscape, weather patterns are becoming more volatile, and the traditional models can no longer keep pace. The Midwest's struggle to accurately predict 100-year floods is a clear example of this problem. Southern Indiana and northern Kentucky, particularly around the Louisville metro area, face floods that occur every 7 or 8 years, despite predictions of a century-long recurrence. In Northern California, where rainfall has decreased overall, these major floods now occur once every 35 years instead of once every century. The global implications of this pattern are evident. From Nairobi to New York City, extreme floods are disrupting daily life and infrastructure. River Nyando's overflow temporarily shut down the Nairobi-Kisumu highway, emphasizing how even critical routes can be paralyzed by natural forces. In New York City, the frequency of 100-year floods has dramatically shortened, raising concerns about preparedness. Hoboken, New Jersey, is working hard to keep up with the changes in weather patterns, preparing for the increased risk of floods. But for many towns and cities, the challenge of adapting to shifting climate conditions is overwhelming. With old maps and limited funding, many communities struggled to protect themselves from more frequent and intense floods. In Kenya, Kisumu Governor Professor Anyang' Nyong'o brought forth troubling news. Over 600 individuals found themselves stranded in their homes, businesses, and healthcare centers when the River Nyando burst its banks late the previous night. The Hero Bridge, which serves as a vital link between Kisumu and Nairobi, along with roads leading to Homa Bay and Migori, were inundated, leaving the entire town of Hero submerged. Governor Nyong'o painted a grim picture, emphasizing how the impassable roads were obstructing the distribution of food and impeding evacuation efforts. Despite the tireless work of the county's committee, composed of multiple government agencies in collaboration with the national government to assist those impacted, the task remained formidable. Efforts were underway to secure boats to rescue isolated households and transport them to safety. His administration had distributed essential supplies valued at 4.8 million shillings over the previous week, but this contribution was only a fraction of what was needed. They were racing against time to deliver more aid to families severely affected by the calamity. In neighboring counties, the situation appeared equally dire. Flash floods, hailstorms, and wind damage wreaked havoc. In Murray County, one person tragically lost their life due to the storms. In Robertson County, where journalist Kylie Walker was stationed, multiple water rescues were also conducted. Kylie Walker stood on Ridge Road in Cedar Hill, assessing the devastation from the recent floods. The aftermath clearly illustrated the unrelenting force of nature. Families were stranded, lives were severely disrupted, and the trail of destruction stretched across Kisumu and beyond. Behind the cameraman, a farm lay in disarray. People waded among a herd of pigs, the gate to the farm shattered by the surging floodwaters. Fortunately, all had managed to escape unharmed. Further down the road, a fallen tree had crushed a home, flooding its interior, but again, the family inside remained safe. The relentless flooding extended beyond Kisumu, affecting regions across the country. In Homa Bay County, schools were closed due to extensive flood damage, and several healthcare facilities were rendered unusable. The local administration struggled to provide emergency medical assistance to affected families, many of whom had to seek temporary shelter in makeshift camps. Nearby, the A. Spartan farm had been reduced to ruins, its structures twisted and scattered. The destructive power of the wind was unmistakable. The homeowner had not seen a funnel cloud, only turbulence just before the barn was struck. Even now, the remaining pillars trembled, though the wind had lessened. On the way to the site, Walker and her team had been forced to pull over and seek cover due to a tornado warning. When they arrived at the farm, they were greeted by a scene of utter devastation. Yet, there was relief that no lives had been lost. Animals hid under cars, and a frantic dog darted through the debris. After some effort, the team managed to reunite the dog with its owner. Neighbors rallied to help those affected by the fallen tree, offering assistance and compassion. In another corner of this disaster, 20 dogs were trapped on the upper floor of a large shed surrounded by debris. Twisted metal and broken wood made rescue nearly impossible. A protective dog guarding the others bit a rescuer, but he remained calm and ensured the animals had water and were in good condition. One man stood, reflecting on the grim scene. He imagined the countless families, possibly up to 300,000 people who had lost everything. They sought refuge at a neighbor's house, but the floodwaters reached that home too. Now, the man was sleepless and terrified by the swaying bridge as trucks rumbled overhead. He feared the bridge might collapse and was uncertain if the floodwaters would return. He applied ointment to a wound and muttered, "It's so sad to see the town and people's homes underwater, like the world ended." Another man stood beside the machine he now called home, where he was living with his children after his house was swallowed by the flood. "I could leave, but I chose to stay and help others because we're all in the same situation," he said. My home's flooded, but we're surviving this calamity together. Everywhere Walker looked, neighbors were lifting one another up, sharing a sliver of hope amid the devastation. Yet behind their smiles and tear-streaked faces, a lingering fear remained about what lay ahead. The flood had taken so much, but it hadn't broken the spirit of the people. Instead, it had brought out the best in them as they rallied together, determined to rebuild their lives in the face of such overwhelming adversity. Will green infrastructure be enough to protect communities, or is climate change overwhelming even the best efforts to adapt? Let us know your thoughts, and remember to like and subscribe for more.